Hi, and welcome to the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. I'm your host, Tegan Thompson. I'm a book lover, a chocoholic, and an INTJ living in a world filled with extroverts. I made this podcast to share my experiences and struggles as an introverted perfectionist, and to bring the inner workings of an introvert's mind to introverts and extroverts alike. So grab a cup of tea and get comfortable. It's time to unmute. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. So in the past, I have discussed diversity briefly at the end of some of my episodes, but I've always wanted to go more in depth about the topic. So this week we'll be discussing what diversity is, why it's important, and ways you can help promote diversity. So I'm just gonna start with talking about what is diversity, and to do that I'm gonna just tell you what the dictionary definition is. And the dictionary definition of diversity is the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. So I know a lot of people, when they hear diversity, they tend to immediately think of race. And I think that's just kind of how diversity has been promoted in society. But here you can even see that the definition of diversity expands way past race. And to go just a little bit deeper than this dictionary definition, diversity is about what makes every single person unique. And it includes our backgrounds, which are our social, cultural, ethnic, educational, financial, etc. backgrounds, right? It can also include your sexual orientation and your gender in there. It includes our personality. I talked about personality pretty in-depth last episode if you want to go back and check it out. But our personality itself is so diverse amongst everybody because there's so many different components, and there's that spectrum I talk about where you are not either one or the other, but you can kind of be in the middle somewhere and be a composition of two of those things. It also includes our life experiences, which include your childhood, your adulthood, relationships, any careers or jobs you've had, etc. And our beliefs, both religious and non-religious beliefs. So as you can see, diversity encompasses a lot of things that people tend to forget about, I think, and is very important to acknowledge and discuss, just to show how broad and big of a range there is when it comes to diversity. Literally, there are no two people that are the same, right? Everyone is unique. Everyone has something different that they can bring to the table, or how they view something, and that is seen simply by looking at what diversity is. So why is diversity important? And there's a list of reasons that is endless for why diversity is important. So I could literally go on and on and on for hours if you wanted me to list everything. But I'm gonna just kind of talk broadly about why diversity is important, and then look at two cases, one in the workplace and then one in the classroom or at schools, just to be a little more specific there. So broadly, diversity is important because it brings new ideas and experiences and perspectives to a group of people who may not have those ideas, experiences, and perspectives, which allows people to learn from each other, and it leads to better, more efficient problem solving, which eventually opens up dialogue and promotes creativity amongst communities and allows for greater self-acceptance because you're able to see that, there isn't one normal. Like, there isn't one way you should be, or one way you should act, or one way you should believe, or one way you should look. And when people see the diversity, they're able to accept themselves for who they are and their uniqueness, because they understand that nobody is the same, that everyone is different, and you can't live up to a societal norm expectation because it essentially doesn't even really exist. So to be more workplace specific, diversity increases productivity and reduces employee turnover. And this is because when a workplace encourages diversity and inclusion, it often makes the employees feel valued and accepted. So they're going to want to continue working at that specific place for a longer period of time rather than looking for a new job, which allows for that retention of your employees. And diversity can allow a workplace or a company to connect to a wider range of customers. Just because, again, kind of you have your customers looking at the company and they're like, do I see myself reflected in this company? Do I see myself represented in this company? If the answer is no, for most consumers, they're not going to gravitate towards that company to purchase their product or whatever it may be. When you do see yourself reflected in a company, you're more open to it, more willing to trust the product, just because you know someone similar to you, whether that be in physical looks, beliefs, background, etc., right? When someone similar to you in any type of way is represented, then you know that because they more than likely trust the product since they're working there, that you can trust it and be open to it. Which in the long run leads to increased revenue for the company. To be classroom specific or school specific, teaching diversity in the classroom prepares students for the diverse world that we live in, and it allows students to become more empathetic and open-minded to diversity and to the differences that people have in all these different categories that I've listed before. And it shows students how to use their own strengths and to acknowledge their own strengths, because your strengths are going to be different from someone else's. And so using your strength and allowing other people to use their strengths allows a community or a workplace or a family or a relationship or whatever it is to be stronger, because everyone is using their strongest aspects and things they can contribute, right? Their strengths. And then it also allows students to accept themselves and others, which is so important, because when you learn that at a younger age, you're able to implement it better when you're older. So you discuss what diversity is, why it's important, and hopefully you're thinking, well, how can I encourage other people to do it? How can I spread it into the world? So how can you promote diversity? And there's a number of ways, but I'm just going to kind of talk generally what you can do. You can always research more specific ways if you want to implement it in a more specific environment, and how to do that. But it's important to implement diversity and inclusion everywhere, in my opinion. So I just wanted to be broad about it when I'm talking about this so that you can do it in your everyday life. So first, you should start by acknowledging the differences between people. When you acknowledge these differences, you're acknowledging diversity, which allows you to be more aware of the differences people have and what makes them unique, and then allows you to also limit your discriminatory behavior. And another thing you can do is ask questions. Always ask questions. It's okay to not know everything. To let you in on a little secret, nobody knows everything. So we all have questions. So it's okay to ask those questions, but by not seeking out the answers to questions you may have or things you don't know, you are choosing to remain unknowledgeable about whatever it is. And so it has to be a conscious decision you make. Are you going to ask those questions? Are you going to educate yourself and learn and grow? Or are you going to stay where you are and not reach your full potential, right? That goes for pretty much everything, actually. It's not just about diversity, but anything in life. If you want to grow, it involves learning and accepting that you don't know everything. So I know that can be hard for a lot of people, but when you accept the fact that nobody knows everything, everybody has questions, then I think it makes you feel a little more comfortable asking those questions. To say the cliche thing that you hear everybody say, if you have a specific question, more than likely other people have that same exact question. So it's not like you're the only one out there who doesn't know the answer to that question. Another thing you can and should do is have conversations, open conversations about diversity. If you don't discuss diversity with others, you can't learn from them, and they can't learn from you. And that's what's so important about growing and promoting diversity, is being able to learn and teach other people what you know, and that is what essentially will grow people's acceptance of diversity. And so that's probably the most critical thing, is that once you have acknowledged, accepted, and started to educate yourself on it, is to have those conversations so that you can continue to learn, but then you can also teach other people who are beginning their journey, right? Another thing is to encourage having personal evaluations for yourself, right? You want to assess the progress you've made and acknowledge it and celebrate it, because it's always great to make progress. And then also acknowledge where you may still need to grow, so that you can see that you still may have certain discriminatory behaviors or ways of thinking that are limiting you from fully accepting and allowing diversity to occur, and then encouraging others to do the same thing. Everyone needs to be aware of the things that they need to work on and grow on, because if you don't acknowledge those things, they're just gonna kind of remain where they are, and it's going to limit you and limit everyone else when it comes to growth. And then the last thing I have is value all diversity, right? It's important to remember that every single human being is unique, and every single human being adds value, including you. You are part of that framework, part of that web of diversity, right? Because everybody is valuable in different ways, and they are all needed to succeed. And so just valuing that diversity, accepting it, acknowledging it, celebrating it. I think it's the most important thing to do. Celebrate it. Be proud and happy of it, because it is what makes us be who we are, and doesn't limit people and limit schools and education or workplaces or anything else, right? So celebrate and value all diversity. So that's what I have on diversity for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or if you learned anything new, please go share it with a friend. And as always, have a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week on the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast.